this might have been a mission also. But how did you originally get? You're a reporter and were writing, but how did you get originally hooked up into the SOG world, or Mr. Billy or Mr. Lou Merletti?
Mm-hmm. Um, all of my books cover the CIA and the Pentagon. And so my reporting always puts my eyeballs on anything and everything that I find incredibly dramatic and interesting and want to tell the story, want to learn about the story in a way myself. Billy was a hard source to pin down. I usually need to feel like I have a major character and also a major trove of documents. That's how we reporters write and report books. You interview, and then you're also looking at documents so that you can confirm a story and push it forward. And then, of course, you go into places you could never even imagine. And that's what happens with the sources. So, it was interesting because Billy Waugh started as a source and definitely became a friend. He was a remarkable human being. And we did some traveling together. It was a little difficult to get some stories out of him at times. And so I had suggested that we go back and visit some of the different places of action. And man, was that a good idea, because getting Billy into an airplane, into a hotel lobby, into a taxi ride, that's where I could really hear some amazing stories from him, because it was almost like he was reliving those moments. He was the king of surveillance, the king of recon.
Wow. And I got lucky. I'd been trying, sorry, messing with my volume here. I had managed to get in touch with Mr. Billy. It was 6 months or so before he started getting sick and ended up needing full care treatment. But he was still sharp enough to where we could speak about things. He couldn't go back and delve deep into exact dates, but we could converse enough and get some history and all that. And those first couple of phone calls, like you said, he's a little prickly to kind of get through that first initial barrier with him. But once he figures out who you are and you're good people, he kind of starts letting it lets it open up a little bit. So when he went from being the source, shall we say, to becoming a friend and maybe hearing all of these stories, did you immediately say, I need to write a book on this, and that was the convergence of that and Surprise Kill Vanish, or how did that come about?
So the order is a little bit different, because as a journalist, you're trained to keep your sources objective, to keep them at a distance. And that's always a little bit tricky, but it's also the best, and it serves the story the most, I believe. And so when I say we became friends, that was like, as I was finishing, once the book published, once a book publishes about a source, I think it's easier to stay in touch with them as a friend, as a colleague and as a friend. And it's interesting because it is often that you have a shared experience and you care about a lot of the same things that person does. But the process of writing about someone is always interesting, at least for me, because you have to keep them at a bit of a distance, because you're constantly fact checking what they say, going to other sources for their version of the story, and it can sometimes get a little bit prickly. I'll give you an example. Billy, first of all, Billy was a remarkable person. He was probably the longest serving CIA paramilitary operator in the agency's history. Now, there may be others, and that may be revealed later, but as far as we know now, that is likely to be true. And, he lived and operated in a world populated by killers and connivers and saboteurs. He was around people who wanted to kill him. And how much of that he did himself was one of the things that was often not spoken of. Those kind of things are really interesting. You could Google Billy and you might get a Reddit post talking about how he killed more people than cancer. As a reporter, those kinds of details are reserved for operations involving enemy combatants that you can talk about legitimately on the record. And so a lot of Billy's work, the deep kind of work, I think gets inferred by readers, and it's why people find him so fascinating, because it's less about you have to use your imagination a lot. I mean, I lay out decades worth of covert operations that Billy Waugh participated in countries around the world. He operated in 64 countries. And I tell you the details, again, objectively. And I think if you can really get into Billy's mind, you can begin to understand how